The last drop, the twin suns of Kepler 442b, had been scorching the desert wasteland for 37 straight hours. Private Marcus Holloway's combat suit registered external temperatures of 68 degrees Celsius, and his internal cooling system had failed 6 hours ago. Each step sent waves of agony through his cracked lips and swollen tongue. The electrolyte indicator on his wrist display blinked a cruel red. 1 vial remaining. The Battle of Crimson Dunes was over. Both human and Zephyrian forces had retreated, leaving behind a graveyard of twisted metal and crystallized sand. Marcus had been separated from his unit during the final push, and now stumbled through the endless expanse of copper-colored wasteland, following a phantom signal on his damaged unit. His vision blurred as heat mirages danced across the horizon. The weight of his rifle felt like an anchor, but military training kept him moving forward. 1 foot, then another. His reserve power cell was down to 12%, and without climate control, he'd be dead within the hour. That's when he saw her. Collapsed against a shattered piece of Zephyrian hull plating, the alien warrior looked like a broken doll. Her elongated limbs were twisted at unnatural angles, and her normally iridescent blue skin had faded to a sickly gray. The distinctive silver armor of the Zephyrian Royal Guard was cracked and scorched, revealing deep gashes beneath. Marcus raised his rifle instinctively and lowered it. The alien, no, the woman was clearly dying. Her chest rose and fell in. Rapid, shallow breaths and a thin trail of purple blood had dried at the corner of her mouth. Her large, multifaceted eyes were half-closed, pupils dilated from dehydration. Every tactical manual, every briefing, every propaganda vid had taught him that Zephyrians were the enemy. They'd invaded human colonies, enslaved populations, and showed no mercy in battle. This particular warrior wore the insignia of an elite unit, probably responsible for dozens of human deaths. But as Marcus looked down at her, all he saw was a dying being in the middle of a hellish wasteland. His hand moved to the electrolyte vial, clipped to his belt. The last one. His ticket to maybe surviving long enough to reach an extraction point. Without it, he'd join the thousands of corpses already feeding the desert scavengers. The alien woman's eyes fluttered open, focusing on him with effort. She spoke something in her native tongue, a sound like wind chimes mixed with static. Then, in broken standard, please ... kill ... quick ... Marcus stared at her for a long moment, feeling the weight of the vial in his palm. The sun continued its merciless assault, and somewhere in the distance, a desert prowler howled. He made his choice. An act of grace. No, Marcus whispered, dropping to his knees beside the dying Zephyrian. His combat boots crunched against the crystallized sand as he set his rifle aside. Not like this. The alien woman, he could see now that she was young, probably not much older than his sister back on New Earth, watched him with confusion and fear. Her breathing was becoming more labored, and Marcus could see the telltale signs of severe dehydration. Sunken cheeks, cracked lips that had turned an alarming shade of purple. Easy, he said softly, unscrewing the cap of his last electrolyte. Vial. The clear liquid inside caught the harsh sunlight like liquid diamonds. I'm not going to hurt you. She tried to pull away, but lacked the strength. A weak sound escaped her throat, whether protest or resignation, Marcus couldn't tell. Her native language was beyond him, but suffering was universal. With gentle hands, Marcus lifted her head, supporting her neck. The Zephyrian skin felt fever-hot against his gloves, and he could feel her pulse racing under his fingertips. Her large eyes beautiful, he realized, like fractured emeralds locked onto his with a mixture of terror and bewilderment. This is going to help, Marcus said, though he knew she probably couldn't understand him. He tilted the vial to her lips, letting the precious liquid flow slowly into her mouth. That's it. Swallow. Some of the electrolyte solution spilled down her chin, but most of it went down her throat. Marcus watched as her eyes widened slightly, the life-giving minerals already beginning their work. Her breathing steadied just a fraction, and some color returned to her ashen features. The vial emptied with a soft clink against her teeth. Marcus set it aside and reached for his emergency medical kit, 3 healing patches and a small tube of burn gel. Military protocol dictated that medical supplies were for human personnel only, but protocols seemed meaningless in this wasteland. "My name is Marcus," he said as he carefully cleaned one of her deeper wounds. "Marcus Holloway. Private, 2nd Battalion, Terra Defense Corps." The alien woman watched him work, her expression shifting from fear to something approaching wonder. "What's your name?" She opened her mouth, producing a series of melodic tones that his translator unit couldn't process. Then, with obvious effort, she managed, "V-E-S-V-E-S-A-R ... Visara," Marcus repeated, applying a healing patch to a particularly nasty gash on her arm. "That's a beautiful name." As he worked, Marcus felt his own strength ebbing. The heat was becoming unbearable, and without the electrolytes, his body was beginning to shut down. His hands shook as he sealed the last of her wounds, and black spots danced at the edges of his vision. "There," he gasped, collapsing beside her against the hull plating. "That should help." Visara turned her head to look at him, and Marcus saw recognition dawning in her alien features. She understood what he'd done, sacrificed his only chance at survival for hers. Her mouth opened and closed several times, as if she wanted to speak, but couldn't find the words in any language. Marcus closed his eyes, feeling the desert heat seeping through his failing suit. At least he wouldn't die alone. The hidden watchers, 3 kilometers above the desert floor, invisible to human sensors, the stealth drone Whisper of Stars maintained its silent vigil. Its quantum processors had been recording everything since the human soldier first appeared. On its sensors, and what it had witnessed defied every algorithm in its behavioral prediction matrix. Captain Nix Valderon of the Zephyrian Intelligence Corps watched the feed with growing disbelief from the bridge of the dreadnought Eternal Throne. Her scaled fingers danced across holographic controls, zooming in on the 2 figures collapsed against the wreckage. "Rewind the sequence," she commanded her aide, Lieutenant Kalen Starweaver, "from the moment the human discovered Princess Visara." The hologram flickered, rewinding to show Marcus raising his rifle, then lowering it. They watched again as he knelt beside the dying princess, shared his last electrolyte vial, and applied his medical supplies to her wounds. "The princess," Kalen whispered, his usually stoic demeanor cracking. "She's alive." Nix had served the royal house for 20 cycles, and she knew Princess Visara's true value to the Zephyrian Empire. Not just as heir to the celestial throne, but as the key to ending this devastating war. The princess had been leading a secret diplomatic mission when her transport was shot down. Mission to negotiate peace terms with the human colonial government. "Alert High Command immediately," Nix ordered, "but maintain radio silence. I want every stealth unit in the sector converging on these coordinates." "Captain," Kalen hesitated, "the human ... He gave up his only chance at survival. For the princess, for our princess." Nix studied the frozen image of Marcus Holloway, this unremarkable human soldier who had just shattered every preconception she held about his species. According to his service record, which her intelligence network had already pulled up, he was nobody special. A colonial farm boy who'd enlisted after the Zephyrians destroyed his homeworld's primary agricultural dome. He had every reason to hate her people, yet there he lay, dying beside the princess he'd saved. "Captain," her communications officer called out, "we're receiving priority signals from High Command." Fleet Admiral Zarek himself is demanding an immediate status report on the princess. Nix felt a chill run down her spine. Admiral Zarek belonged to the war faction, those who believed the only good human was a dead human. If he learned that a human had saved the princess, he might order both of them eliminated to prevent any ... complications. Delay that report, she decided. Tell them we're still analyzing the drone footage. But Captain, that's an order, Lieutenant. Nix turned back to the hologram, watching as Marcus used the last of his strength to tend to Vezara's wounds. In the current frame, both figures appeared unconscious, possibly dead, but thermal readings showed faint life signs from both dots she had. Perhaps an hour before Admiral Zarek lost patience and demanded immediate action. An hour to figure out how to save both the princess and the human who'd given everything to keep her alive. Prepare the medical bay, she told her chief surgeon over the comm, and ready the long-range teleporter. We're going in. Orders regarding the human prisoner, Captain. Nix looked at Marcus Holloway. One more time, this farm boy who'd become something unprecedented in the annals of interstellar warfare. He's not a prisoner, she said quietly. He's a guest. Awakening Marcus awoke to the sensation of cool air against his skin and the absence of the twin sun's brutal heat. His eyes fluttered open to reveal a ceiling of polished crystal that pulsed with soft, bioluminescent light. The surface above him seemed to breathe, expanding and contracting in a rhythm that was almost hypnotic. Where? He croaked, his voice barely a whisper. You are safe, Marcus Holloway. The voice was melodic, speaking perfect standard with only the faintest accent. Marcus turned his head surprised, but he could move without pain, and saw a tall Zephyrian female in elegant robes approaching his bedside. Her skin held the healthy blue-silver sheen of her species, and her multifaceted eyes reflected the ambient light like prisms. I am Captain Nix Valderin of the Imperial Fleet, she continued, stopping beside what Marcus now realized was some kind of medical pod. You have been unconscious for 2 solar cycles. Memory rushed back like a flood. The desert. A dying alien warrior. His last electrolyte vial. Vezara, Marcus said, struggling to sit up. Is she? Princess Vezara is alive and recovering, thanks to your actions. Nix's expression was unreadable, but her tone held something Marcus couldn't quite identify. She insisted on being present when you awakened. A section of the crystalline wall dissolved, and Marcus's breath caught in his throat. The alien he'd saved entered the chamber, but she looked nothing like the broken, dying warrior he remembered. Her skin glowed with health, and she moved with fluid grace. She wore robes of deep purple that seemed to shift and shimmer as she walked, and a circlet of silver rested on her brow. Princess? Marcus stared at her in shock. Vezara approached slowly, as if afraid he might disappear. When she reached his bedside, she placed one long-fingered hand over her heart and bowed deeply, a gesture that sent ripples of surprise through the other Zephyrians present. Marcus Holloway, she said, her standard much clearer than it had been in the desert. You gave me life when you should have taken it. You shared your essence when you had nothing left to give. In my people's culture, this creates a debt that can never be repaid. I don't understand, Marcus said, looking between Vezara and Captain Valderin. Your royalty? But you were in combat armor, fighting. I was leading a diplomatic mission, Vezara explained, settling into a chair beside his bed. My transport was shot down while traveling under false identification to meet with your colonial government. I had been tasked with negotiating a ceasefire. A ceasefire? Captain Valderin stepped forward. The war has cost both our peoples dearly. Private Holloway, the princess was carrying terms for an armistice when her ship was destroyed. Your own forces likely fired the shots that brought her down, not knowing who they were attacking. Marcus felt the weight of irony crushing down on him. So I saved the life of someone my own side tried to kill. Yes, Misara said softly. And in doing so, you may have saved both our species. The medical bay's doors dissolved again, and several more Zephyrians entered. Marcus could sense the tension immediately. These newcomers wore military uniforms and carried themselves with predatory grace. The lead figure was massive, even by Zephyrian standards, with scars crossing his face and cold, calculating eyes. Ah, the human awakens, the scarred Zephyrian said, his voice dripping with disdain. I am Fleet Admiral Zarek, and I have come to personally escort Princess Visara back to the celestial throne. Marcus saw Captain Valderon stiffen, and noticed how Vezira's hand moved instinctively toward a concealed weapon. Admiral, Visara said carefully, I was just explaining to our guest how his actions were irrelevant, Zarek interrupted. You are alive, Princess, and that is what matters. As for this human ... double quotes, his eyes fixed on Marcus with unconcealed hatred. Disposing of him will prevent any ... complications. The debt of honor, the temperature in the medical bay, seemed to drop 10 degrees. Marcus watched as every Zephyrian in the room took sides without saying a word, Captain Valderon and her crew moving subtly closer to his bed, while Admiral Zarax. Soldiers positioned themselves near the exits. Admiral, Princess Visara said, rising from her chair with deadly grace, I believe you misunderstand the situation. Princess, you are overwrought from your ordeal, Zarek replied, his tone patronizing. Return to your quarters while I handle this matter. This matter, Visara said, her voice carrying a harmonic resonance that made the crystal walls vibrate, is a human being who sacrificed his life to save mine. By the sacred laws of the celestial throne, he is under my personal protection. Zarek's scarred face twisted into a sneer. The sacred laws do not apply to alien species, Your Highness. This creature is a curiosity at best, a security risk at worst. Marcus started to speak, but Visara held up a hand, her eyes never leaving the Admiral. Are you questioning my interpretation of Zephyrian law, Admiral? Because if you are, I suggest you reconsider very carefully. The threat in her voice was unmistakable. Even Marcus, with no knowledge of Zephyrian politics, could sense the power struggle unfolding. Captain Valderon had quietly moved her hand to her sidearm, while her crew had spread out in a defensive formation. Your Highness, Zarek said, his voice taking on a more respectful tone. Surely you understand that this human's knowledge of our medical capabilities, our ship locations, will remain exactly where it belongs, Marcus interrupted, surprising everyone. He slowly stood up from the bed, pleased to find his strength had fully returned. With me, and going nowhere. Zarek whirled on him. You dare speak in the presence of a princess who I watched dying in the desert, Marcus said firmly. A woman who thanked me for a kindness I'd have shown to anyone in her situation. He looked directly at Visara. Your Highness, I don't understand your politics or your laws, but I understand honor. If you need to let him kill me to protect your position, I understand. You don't owe me anything. The silence that followed was deafening. Then Princess Visara began to laugh a sound like silver bells that filled the chamber with unexpected warmth. Captain Valderon, she said, please note in your official log that Private Marcus Holloway has just demonstrated why his species may be the most remarkable we have ever encountered. She turned to Admiral Zarek, and her demeanor shifted to pure royal authority. Admiral, you will return to your flagship immediately and await new orders. The diplomatic mission will proceed as planned, with Private Holloway as my personal guest and witness to the proceedings. Your Highness, the risks are mine to take. Her voice carried finality. Your war has failed, Admiral. Perhaps it is time to try something else. Zarek's hand moved to his weapon, and for a moment, Marcus thought the Zephyrian was going to start a firefight right there in the medical bay. Instead, the Admiral straightened and saluted stiffly. "As you command, Princess." He turned and stalked out, his soldiers following. When the doors sealed behind them, Isara slumped slightly, the royal mask slipping to reveal exhaustion. "Was that wise?" Captain Valderin asked quietly. "Probably not," Visara admitted. "But Marcus showed me something in that desert, that compassion can exist even between enemies. If we're going to end this war, both sides need to see that." She looked at Marcus, who was beginning to understand that his simple act of kindness had somehow changed the course of history. "Ready or not, Private Holloway," she said with a smile that held equal parts hope and mischief, "you're about to become the most important diplomat in the galaxy." Outside the ship, the stars wheeled in their ancient patterns, indifferent to the small acts of mercy that sometimes reshape entire civilizations. But in the medical bay of the Eternal Throne, 3 beings from different worlds began planning for a peace that might actually last. End of story.